Good afternoon. Today we will be studying the next topic of Unit 3, which is internetworking. And in this topic, internetworking, we will deal with the interconnection of multiple networks. So, internetworking, as the word itself says, that multiple networks connected together. And here in this topic, we will study the problems that arise in internetworking and what are the protocols which deal with these problems that arise in internetworking. So first and foremost, let's define the term internetworking. It is the practice of connecting multiple computer networks. So multiple computer networks which are connected such that any pair of hosts in the connected network can exchange messages irrespective of the hardware. So suppose if we are dealing with different networks which have different kind of topologies and which use different transmission mediums, and even then we can send messages, then that kind of network is known as an internetwork. And the resulting system of this interconnected networks are called internetwork, or simply the term which we use nowadays is the famous term internet. So this internet is basically a network, multiple networks connected together with different kind of hardware or different topologies and transmission mediums. Now, in this internetworking, what are the problems that arise? So, first and foremost, we have seen we were earlier using the IPv4 addresses, then later on we transitioned to IPv6 address. So, this transition resulted in a few problems because we cannot convert all the IPv4 addresses of the world to IPv6 addresses. So this took considerable amount of time. So it takes a bit of time before every system in the world can move from IPv4 to IPv6. And this change should happen smoothly, right? So to make this change happen smoothly, three strategies were decided, and one of these strategy is tunneling. Okay, so one of the strategies of converting or transitioning from IPv4 to IPv6 is tunneling. And next, we have the concept of fragmentation. Already, I may have described this concept, that is dividing your data into pieces and sending it over the network. So fragments is basically pieces of your data which is sent on a network. After that, we have the concept of congestion control. So actually, congestion is a problem or an issue in the internet, and congestion control is solving that issue by using some algorithms. So what is congestion? It is similar to what happens in traffic congestion. So that is whenever we have a network layer where the message traffic is so heavy that it slows down the network response time, that is the sending and the receiving of the messages and the acknowledgement takes time in a network, then it is known as a congestion. So for solving these issues, for congestion, we already have these algorithms which we will be studying. And for the other two things, we are studying a few internet control protocols also. So the internet control protocols are ARP, RARP, BOOTP, and DHCP. So we'll be seeing 4 internet control protocols along with the other problems and the solution of these of these network. That is, whenever a multiple networks are connected, the internet, then what are the problems that arise and what are the solutions that has been designed already. So let's proceed with the first topic of this part of your unit, which is tunneling. So now what is tunneling? As I said, whenever earlier IPv4 addresses were used, which were of how many bits? 32 bits. And then later on, when it was realized that IPv4 addresses won't be sufficient for all the electronic devices connected to the internet, we transitioned to IPv6, which were of 128 bits. That is, the addresses of 128 bits. Now for this, because this transition cannot take place at a time, a few strategies were designed by an organization, by the organization which looks after this issue, which is known by the name of IETF, to help with this transition. So tunneling is one of the transition. The other two strategies are, tunneling is one of the strategies which help in the transition. The other two are dual stack and header translation. So this is the first one and this is the second one which helps in the transition. Now in our syllabus we just have tunneling, so we will see tunneling. So what is tunneling now? A technique of internetworking called tunneling is used when source and destination networks are of the same type and they are connected through a network of different types. So for example, for this we can see this figure. So we have IPv6 host and IPv6 host over here. Both of the systems which are communicating use IPv6 addressing strategy, but the region through which they are communicating uses IPv4. That is, IPv4 region is connecting the two hosts which use IPv6 addressing. Now what will happen whenever the sender, let's assume this is the sender and this is the receiver, whenever the sender is sending the data, it will have the IPv6 header, and we have seen that there is a difference between IPv4 and IPv6 header. So what will happen here in the case of tunneling, what it does is, if two computers are using IPv6 and they want to communicate with each other and the packet is passing through a IPv4 region, then what happens is, to pass through this region, the packet must have an IPv4 address, right? IPv6 address won't be recognized by this IPv4 region. So what will happen is, the IPv6 packet, so this is your IPv6 packet, it is encapsulated or it is stored in an IPv4 packet. So this entire thing is considered as the data and it is again stored in a IPv4 header. So basically this IPv6 packet is like a capsule and it is capsuled in the outer coverages of IPv4. And once it passes through this IPv4 region, when it leaves this region, it will leave this IPv4 header behind. And IPv4 packet is carrying and IPv6 packet as data. So basically, the IPv4 packet is carrying the IPv6 packet as data, right? So this is the IPv4 header. Let me just clear it. IPv4 header is the data is this entire thing, including the IPv6 header. Why does it need to do so? Because it is passing through the IPv4 region. And in this case, the IPv6 packet as data, we have a protocol field, right? So that protocol value is set to 41. That is, it is showing that the data which is being carried is along with the header, and this is the IPv6 header. So this actually demonstrates the tunneling strategy. Okay, so basically IPv4 packet is carrying IPv6 as data. Why is it doing so? Because the region through which it is passing is an IPv4 region. That is, it recognizes only IPv4 addresses. It does not have the concept of IPv6. So it tunnels or it uses a tunneling strategy. That is, it encapsulates or it takes the IPv6 header along with the data, covers it with the IPv4 header, and then passes it through this region. Once it leaves the region, again this header is discarded. So here, as you see, there is no IPv4 header. That header is discarded and it is given back to the host in the same way as it had initially started. Okay, so this is the concept of tunneling. It is actually important for 2 marks and is a very simple concept. Now we will look at the next concept of fragmentation. What is fragmentation? Fragmentation is basically done by the network layer and it is a very important concept. What is it? Is basically individual networks within an internet may specify different maximum packet sizes. So suppose if we have a network A, B, C, D, E. Now suppose the network A wants to send data to network D. then it may either have to pass through network E or it may have to pass through network B, whichever route it takes. Then suppose network A to B, the maximum packet size is 80 bytes, and network A to E, the maximum packet bytes is 40 bytes only. And then network E to D will have another maximum packet size similarly over here. So basically, suppose network A is transferring 200 bytes of data. Then what will happen? Okay, this is all an example. We know that we can transfer maximum size of data which can be transferred as 65535. So I'm just taking this as an example just for understanding purposes. So if network 8 wants to transfer 200 bytes of data to network D, then what will happen is basically if it passes through network B, it has to divide its data into packets of 80 bytes each. 80 is the maximum size. We can send packets of less than 80 bytes each also. If it is passing through network E, it may have to divide packets into 40 bytes each. So what is this basically? This is this division of data to be sent on the network is the maximum transmission unit, MTU. Okay, so fragmentation is done by the network layer when the maximum size of datagram is greater than the maximum size of the data that can be held in a frame. Okay, so this basically 80 bytes, we know that we send it in the form of a frame, right? So this frame can only hold 80 bytes of data. I'm excluding the header over here. We will have a header also. So what the network layer does is it divides the datagram received from the, so if it is receiving 200 bytes of data, it will divide the layer, it will divide the data into fragments so that the data flow is not disrupted. Okay, so for this reason, we are dividing the data into fragments. Or basically, fragments you have to remember is pieces. You are dividing the data into different pieces so that the different networks which have different maximum transmission units, it should not disrupt the data flow of the same. So individual networks within an internet may specify different maximum packet sizes or different maximum transmission unit. It would be inefficient and unwieldy to try to dictate. So basically, we can have another thing which we can consider is uniform packet size, right? What is uniform packet size? We can specify that each network should have a uniform packet size. Suppose I am assigning the uniform packet size to 50 bytes. And I am saying, or I am authorizing that each network should only send data of 50 bytes. Now, why would be this inefficient? Suppose few networks may have higher speed and they may be able to send the data more than 50 bytes per unit time. And some networks may have lower speeds or slower speeds, and they may not be able to send 50 bytes of data per unit time. So that is why this uniform packet size is not a good solution. So if it is not a good solution, then what is the other solution to send data such that the data flow is not disrupted? The concept is fragmentation. So thus routers may need to fragment. So who will be doing this fragmentation? The routers need to fragment, because if suppose I have given example where we are passing only through one network. If suppose your data is passing through 10 to 12 networks, then who will do the fragmentation? There, the routers need to fragment the data into smaller pieces, and that smaller pieces are known as either segments or fragments before transmitting to the next network. So this concept is now fragmentation. I hope you have understood the concept. So each router basically it takes out the data from the frame, it receives, processes it, and then encapsulates into another frame. Who is doing all this? The router is doing everything. And the format and size of the received frame depends on the protocol used by the physical network. The format and size of the sent frame depends on the protocol used by the physical network through which the frame is going to travel. Now, once again, we will just see what is maximum transfer unit. So each data link layer protocol has its own frame format. One of the fields defined in the format is the maximum size of the datagram. Usually, the value of the MTU depends on the physical network protocol. So to make the IPv4 protocol independent of the physical network, we must divide the datagram to make it possible to pass through these networks, and that is the concept of fragmentation. So whenever we are talking about fragmentation, the source usually does not fragment the IPv4 packet. The transport layer will instead segment the data into a size that can be accommodated by IPv4. Now, whenever a datagram is fragmented, it requires parts of the header to be copied into the fragment. Suppose if we are having a data of 200 bytes, then we need to copy the data of 200 bytes if I am dividing it into 5 parts or 5 fragments of 40 bytes each. Then for all these fragments, I need to attach the header also, right? And some of the fields of the header should be the same, like the total size of the datagram, it will be 200 bytes. And the number of hops, the time to live will be the same, because all the fragments should live up to the same time, and they should be received at the destination in such a way that if we receive all the fragments, then they should have the sequence number, and then they can be arranged in an order. So whenever you are talking about all these things, all of these things needs some kinds of fields in the header. We have already seen it in the IPv4 header, if you remember. So let's proceed with the same. Since there are 16 bits for total length in IP header, so maximum size of that IP datagram we have seen is 65,535 bytes. And in IP, datagram fragments are reassembled at the destination and system. The IP fragmentation technique uses the following information. We know that it has an identifier, then it will have flags, offset, and the data length. So these are the fields we have. Data length is basically, it is a separate field. The three important fields are identification, which we have seen according to our diagram, that is what I am mentioning. Identification is the first one. The second is the flags, and the third is the fragmentation offset. Fragmentation offset. So let's just revise how many bits each of them has. So identification is of 16 bits. Flags is of 3-bit field. So this is 3-bit. And this concept I am teaching is with respect to IPv4 header. In IPv6, fragmentation is not performed by the header. We don't have these fields in the IPv6 header. We are studying this concept with respect to IPv4 header. Okay, and the fragmentation offset is of 13 bits. So now we will study these 3 fields in detail. Before proceeding with the different fields of fragmentation in the IPv4 header, we will first look at the maximum transfer unit. Now, what is maximum transfer unit? As I already said, it is the maximum size which can be sent on the maximum size of data which can be sent on the network protocol. Basically, whenever we are defining a MTU, it is a datagram encapsulated in a frame of maximum length. So here, if you see, this is the IP datagram, and we have the header. Whenever we are talking about MTU, the header is always excluded. So we don't include the header, and the data is taken as the maximum length of data which can be encapsulated in a frame. Now this table, it denotes the MTU for different physical network protocols. So the values given here are the MTUs for different physical network protocol. For hyper channel, we have the maximum transfer unit of the entire total length of data, which is 65,535. Then we have the MTU for token ring with different speeds, then Ethernet, X.25, etc. Now we will look into the different fields of fragmentation, that is the IP header fields of fragmentation, which are as follows. So we have the identifier, the flags, and the fragmentation offset field. Now what is an identifier? This identifier, so this second row of the IPv4 header, so I am always talking about IPv4 header whenever the topic is fragmentation, because IPv6 does not do fragmentation. So here, in the case of IPv6 does not do fragmentation in the network layer. That is important. So here in the case of this second row is for fragmentation entirely. So identifier is of 16 bits, flags is of 3 bits, and the offset is of 13 bits. So first and foremost, what is a identifier? So this identification number, it helps in reassembling of the data or the datagram when it has reached the destination. So for reassembling of a packet, whenever the different packets are reaching the destination, then they have to understand that which packet belongs to which datagram or which fragment belongs to which datagram. So for that reason, this field is included, which is identifier. Now what does it do? It is basically a 16-bit field, which identifies the datagram originating from the source host. Now what does it do? It makes sure that the data packets or the fragments are assembled correctly when they reach the destination. It knows that all fragments of the original datagram have the same identification value. So this is very important. They will have the same identification value. So this is very important. What does an identifier do is basically it contains the same identification value, and whenever these fragments reach the destination, all the packets with the same identification value are regrouped or reassembled together. Now what is the identification value? Basically it is the IPv4 protocol uses a counter, and that counter basically is initialized to a positive number. So we use a counter with a positive number, and whenever the IPv4 protocol sends a datagram, it copies this counter value into the identification field, and afterward it increments the counter by 1. So this is the first step and the second step. First step is it keeps the counter to a positive number, and it then copies it to the datagram whenever it is being generated, whenever it is leaving the sender. After it has been copied, the counter is incremented by 1. So as long as this counter is, where is it kept? It is kept in the main memory. So as long as this counter is maintained, each datagram will have a unique identification value, and that unique identification value is again copied into different fragments of that datagram. Once all the data fragments have reached to the destination side, all the fragments containing the same identification value are assembled into one datagram basically. So this is the concept of a identifier. Now we will see what are the 3 bits in flag. So basically flags which are used in fragmentation, it contains 3 bits. So this is the first bit, second bit, and third bit. So first bit, as you see, is reserved. First bit is reserved. The second bit is called the do not fragment bit, and the third bit is called the more fragment bit. So there are 3 bits. 3 bits are individually kept. First bit is reserved. Second bit is the do not fragment bit. The third bit is the more fragment bit. It is denoted by D and M over here. Now with respect to the second bit, first we will see. So whenever the second bit is 1, if D is 1, then the machine must not fragment the datagram. So do not fragment if the value is 1. If it cannot pass the datagram through any available network, that is, we are supposed to not fragment when the value is 1, right? So if suppose the size is more than the MTU and it is not able to pass through the network, then what will happen is it will discard this datagram. And if once it discards, it will send the error message to the sender. Now, if the value is 0 for the D bit, then what will happen? The datagram can be fragmented. So datagram can be fragmented. This is when the value is 1. When the value is 0. When the value is 1, it should not fragment. And if it is not able to pass, then it will send a error message and the packet is datagram is discarded. Now, what will happen in the case of more fragment bit? So whenever we are talking about more fragment, if the value is 1, that means the datagram is not the last fragment. Datagram is not last fragment. That is, more fragments are arriving. And whenever the value is 0, this means it is the last or the only fragment. That is, this datagram, whichever is arriving, is the last fragment or the only fragment. So the same explanation is given in this table. You can, I'll just zoom it in so it is visible. Yes. So the first bit is reserved. The don't fragment bit, when it is set to 1, it specifies that the datagram should not be fragmented. Since the fragmentation process is invisible, most protocols don't care about this. And whenever it is set to 0, we can fragment it. Similarly, with respect to more fragment, when it is set to 0, it indicates the last fragment. When it is set to 1, it indicates that more fragments are yet to come in the fragmented message. So this is with respect to the flags. Now we have the example. So before example, we have to see the last bit, which is the fragmentation offset. To understand the offset, we have to remember that offset is basically a 13-bit field and it specifies the position of this fragment with respect to the whole datagram. So suppose ahead of this datagram, suppose if we have a packet which is divided into 4 datagrams or 4 fragments, then if this is fragment 1, fragment 2, fragment 3 and fragment 4, then in each of the these fragmentation fields, the offset will differ. If fragment 1, then the offset will be 0. That is, there is no packet ahead of this fragment. If fragment 2, it will say that already there is 175. There is 1400 bytes of data which you have received already. So let's understand this with an example first. So over here, we have a datagram with data size of 4000 bytes. And this 4000 bytes of data is being fragmented into 3 fragments. So this is your fragment 1, fragment 2 and fragment 3. So the bytes in this original datagram are numbered from 0 to 3999, and the first fragment carries bytes from 0 to 1399. The second fragment is from 1400 to 2799, and the third fragment is 2800 to 399. So basically, what will be the offset value in each case? So the offset value will be the initial value or the initial byte divided by 8. So the first fragment, the first byte is all zeros. If we divide it by 8, it will be 0. In the second fragment, we have to divide 1400 by 8, we get 175, and that is the second offset value. That is for the offset value for the second fragment. Similarly, for the third fragment, the offset value is we have to divide 2800 by 8. We will get the offset value for the third fragment. Why are we doing that? Why are we dividing it by 8? The value of offset is measured in unit of 8 bytes. So if we have whatever byte of data is given, we have to measure it in unit of 8 bytes. So if we are supposed to measure it in unit of 8 bytes, we have to divide the first byte of the fragment with 8. So this is done because the length of the offset field is only 13 bits. For that reason, we are dividing it by 8. Now the same example, we will see it in a bit more detail. So we have the original datagram. In the original datagram, what is the total length field? You can see over here, the total length is 4000 bytes. Plus what is the header of IPv4? It is of 20 bytes. So 4020 is this field. After that, we have the identification number. As you can see, the identification number is common to all the fragments. So this is the first fragment, second fragment. Second fragment is again divided into two more fragments, the same identification number, and the fragment number 3. Now after that, what is the values of the flag and the offset? For the flag, you can see this is the more fragment bit, which means we can fragment, if you remember with this slide, so we can have more fragments. That is, whenever it is set to, in this example, whenever it is set to 1, it means we can have more fragments. Here also it has more fragments. Whenever it is set to 0, it means it is the last fragment. And the offset value is given over here. So first we have to divide it by 000 by 8. Then we are dividing 1400 by 8. Again, this fragment is divided into two more fragments. That is, the fragment number 2 is divided into two more fragments. So the first fragment, what will be the offset value? Again, the offset value will be 1400 by 8. It is 175. For the second fragment of fragment number 2, we have to divide it by 2200. That is, first fragment is from 1400 to 2199 bytes. The second fragment is from 2200. So we have to divide it by 8. We will get the value 275. So that will be the offset value in the case of this fragmentation concept. Now we will see a few things. So it highlights many key internet characteristics, and fragmentation is decentralized. That is, we are not sending all the entire datagram together. We are decentralizing it, and each fragment will choose again its own path, and each network may choose its own maximum transfer unit, as we have seen in the table earlier. And this is a connectionless datagram protocol. Each fragment contains the full routing information. So basically, each fragment can travel independently on different paths. And routers or receiver, what will happen now is routers or receiver may silently may discard the fragments, and in that case, if the sender is not alerted, then the entire datagram does not reach the destination, and most of the work is done at the end point. That is, the destination will reassemble the fragments. Now what is the next thing? Fragmentation in reality is expensive. That is, memory and CPU overhead is required, and it is better to avoid fragmentation if possible. And maximum transfer unit, basically it sends a suppose if it sends a packet with don't fragment bit sent, then what will happen if it cannot fragment and the maximum transfer unit is less than the original data length, then it cannot fragment and it will discard the packet. And also, router which handle the fragments should be fast, and they should have specialized hardware, which will obviously be expensive scenario. So basically, for that we require general purpose CPU for handling the fragments. So this concludes the topic of fragments, and now we will be seeing the next topic, which is congestion control. But before seeing congestion control, we have to know a few definitions. So the first is the data traffic. Now, whenever we are talking about congestion control, let's understand it in terms of the general traffic on roads. So if we have traffic, then there should be some kind of congestion control. There should be signals or traffic policemen to keep the traffic in check. Similarly, in this case, we have congestion control and another term which is quality of service to control the data traffic. Now, what is data traffic? Basically, on a physical transmission, if a message is being transmitted and multiple datagrams are traveling on a single transmission link and which exceeds the bandwidth, then in that case data traffic will occur. So if data traffic occurs, then we have to do congestion control. So in congestion control, we try to avoid traffic congestion. So basically we are talking about two things, right? First is congestion control, the second is quality of service. So in the congestion control, what we do is we try to avoid traffic congestion, and in quality of service, we try to create an appropriate environment in the traffic. Now, what does this mean? This means that basically, whenever suppose if you are taking in terms in the real world the roads traffic with vehicles, then in that case, you can say that the congestion control is done with the help of signals, traffic signals, and traffic policemen. But there is a quality of service also, which criteria which is important. Now, what does this criteria entail? It means that the roads should be of good quality so that the vehicles travel smoothly. So similarly, over here also we have something known as quality of service, which creates an appropriate environment for the traffic. That is, for packets to pass through, appropriate environment should be present. So for that reason, we have to focus on quality of service also. So before talking about this congestion control and quality of service, let's see what is the data traffic. So traffic is basically, in the case of data traffic, these are the three terms which we will have. First is the data rate, then we have the maximum burst size and the peak data rate and average data rate, and this is measured in seconds. So basically, whenever we are talking about the data rate, then the data will travel in terms of time. So that needs to be measured also. The average data rate is basically the number of bits sent during the period of time. So we can write it as average data rate is equal to amount of data divided by time in seconds for that period. What will be the peak data rate? The peak data rate defines the maximum data rate of the traffic. So whatever is the maximum value of the traffic, it will be the peak data rate. The maximum burst size is basically, for example, if the data is flowing steadily and suddenly there is an increase of data, then this maximum burst size refers to the maximum length of time the traffic is generated at the peak rate. Now, there will be three different type of traffic whenever we are talking in terms of data traffic. First is the constant bit rate, where the data is traveling at a constant speed. So this is the graph for the constant bit rate. Now, in the case of constant bit rate, the data will travel at a constant speed for a given amount of time. Then next we have the variable bit rate. So in this category, the rate of the data flow changes with time. It won't remain constant. So suddenly it will be suddenly data will travel at a good speed, then suddenly it will go into a slump. So in this type of flow, the average data rate and the peak data rate are different. In this flow, the average data rate and the peak data rate all are the same. Now, what will be the burst? The other category is the bursty category. So in the bursty data category, the data rate changes suddenly in a very short time. So here, as you see, the data is going at a very high speed. Then this is a void area, that is no data is traveling in this time. And then again, there is a small transfer or transmission of data. So basically, bursty traffic, this kind of traffic is one of the main reasons of congestion in the network. Now let's see the definition of congestion. So congestion in a network may occur if the load on the network is greater than the if the load on the network, the number of packets sent to the network is greater than the capacity of the network. The number of packets a network can handle, if it is greater than whatever is the capacity, then we will have congestion. And congestion control refers to the mechanisms and techniques to control the congestion and keep the load below the capacity. So basically, whenever we are talking about congestion control, we have to make sure that that there are a few steps taken to control the congestion, and we do not send more data than the network can handle. Now, basically, let's see an example. If we have a router, then there will be queues. The data structure queues is maintained so that the data which is being sent, or the datagram which is being sent, make sure that there is no congestion on the given router. Next, we will see the different categories. So the categories are not important right now in the syllabus. What is important is the mechanisms or the algorithm, the two algorithms which we are using. So congestion control refers to the techniques and mechanisms that can either prevent congestion before it happens or remove the congestion after it has happened. In general, we divide congestion control mechanisms into two broad categories. One is the open loop congestion control and the other is the closed loop congestion control. Open loop means we are preventing before the congestion is happening. Closed loop means we are removing the congestion. So in the case of open loop, these are the different ways we can make sure that the congestion does not happen. And in the case of closed loop, this is basically once the congestion has happened, how we can ensure that it does not occur next once the data is again being transmitted. Now there are two kinds of algorithms for the congestion control mechanism. The first is the leaky bucket and the other is the token bucket algorithm. So these two algorithms are to be understood to understand the congestion avoidance basically. These two come under the next point, which is the quality of service. Quality of service is creating an environment so that congestion does not occur. So first, let's see the leaky bucket. A leaky bucket is basically, suppose if you have, it can be shown with this diagram. If you have a tap and if there is a bucket under the tap and the bucket has a small hole at the bottom, the water leaks from the bucket at a constant rate. So the tap may give the bursty flow, that is once you open the tap, it will start giving water at high rate, and once you close it or keep it at a minimum, the water speed will go down. But what will leaky bucket do? Leaky bucket will make sure, leaky bucket is basically there is a hole in the bucket and it will make sure that the flow of the water is fixed. So the rate at which the water leaks does not depend on the input, but it depends on depends on whether the bucket is empty or not. The input rate can vary, so the amount of water coming from the tap can vary, but the output will remain constant. So basically, suppose if you have data which is being sent, 12 Mbps is sent over 2 seconds, and 2 Mbps is sent over 3 seconds. And also there is a gap in between, as you notice, from 2 seconds to 7 seconds. Now, this is a bursty data. What will the leaky bucket do? Leaky bucket will make sure that this bursty data comes under the fixed rate data or the constant rate data. How will that happen? So 12 Mbps in 2 seconds means totally we have got 24 Mbps of data, and 2 Mbps in 3 seconds means plus 6 Mbps of data. So that will amount to 30 Mbps of data, and the leaky bucket will make sure that the data travels in the fixed rate data. That is, if it is sending 3 Mbps of data, then it will send it over 10 seconds. So this is the concept of leaky bucket. Let's see the definition over here. A leaky bucket algorithm shapes bursty traffic into fixed rate traffic by averaging the data rate. And also, one important thing to be remembered is it may drop the packets if the bucket is full. So if you notice over here, if the bucket gets full, it will drop the packets. So it won't release the packets, it will discard the packets basically. Let's see the implementation of the leaky bucket. So whenever the buckets are arriving, it is full. If it becomes full, if whenever the datagram is arriving, if the bucket becomes full, then the packets are discarded. If not, they are added to a queue and it will remove the packets at a constant rate, and it will process the packets and the packets will depart from the router. So basically the leaky bucket, what it does is it will make sure that first it will understand that. So basically leaky bucket prevents congestion. So suppose as an analogy, we can consider the highway during the rush hour. If everyone starts coming at the same time, there will be a congestion. So what happens is we create a constant flow of traffic on the highway to make sure that there is no congestion. So the leaky bucket implementation is shown over here. Now, what is the disadvantage of the leaky bucket? It is very restrictive. That is, it does not calculate the idle time. So you can see over here in this graph that there is some amount of idle time also. So if the host is not sending for a while, the bucket will become empty. Now, if the host has bursty data, the leaky bucket only allows average. So you can notice over here at the idle time also, it is only allowing at an average rate only. The idle time is not taken into account. So what will happen in this case? In this case, we created the concept of token bucket. Now, what is a token bucket? The token bucket algorithm allows idle time also to be taken into account. So at each time in the bucket, we will add a token. So at each tick of the clock, one token is added. And once the token is added, suppose if we are sending the data, then if the data is arrived, if the bucket is full, it will discard. If not, it will add to the queue. Once it has entered the queue, while it is sending, one token is removed and discarded per data transmitted. So this per cell transmitted is basically per datagram transmitted. So suppose the system removes one token for every byte of data sent. For example, if n is 100 and the host is idle for 100 ticks or 100 seconds, then what will happen? The bucket collects 10,000 tokens. Now the host can consume all these tokens in one tick with 10,000 cells or 10,000 amount of data, or the host can take 1,000 ticks. Basically what it is doing, it is dividing. So suppose if we have 10,000 tokens in the bucket, basically it is empty for 10,000 ticks, right? So for one tick it is adding one token. So it is idle for 10,000 ticks. It has added 10,000 tokens. Now suppose if we got 10,000 byte of data, what will happen? If we got 10,000 byte of data, it will take all the tokens discarded and send all the 10,000 bytes together. Or what it can do, it can assign 1,000 tokens for 1,000 bytes and send it in 10 seconds also. Both of the cases are possible. So basically, in the case of token bucket, the algorithm or the implementation itself is deciding for how much time or what is the data rate at which the data can be sent. So this token bucket is basically, instead of this token per tick, we use a counter. We maintain a counter and the counter is initialized first to 0. Each time a token is added, the counter is incremented by 1. After that, each time a data is sent, the counter is decremented by 1. Whenever the counter is 0, the host cannot send the data. So what happens in the case of token bucket is basically the token bucket allows bursty traffic at a regulated maximum rate. So the token bucket itself decides what the data rate should be, and suppose in the case, and it also makes sure that the idle time that the bucket is sitting idle, that time is taken into account, but that does not happen in the case of leaky bucket. So this is the concept of leaky bucket and token bucket for the quality of service concept, which makes sure that there is a good environment to control the traffic.